Go whatever. I mean, that'll be funny. So, just before we start, how's the weather where you are?
It's kind of cool here. So I was in Dallas for a gig through the start of January, and it's supposed to hit 50 today, but it's about 30 right now out there, and that's Fahrenheit. So it's around freezing right now.
Oh, around freezing. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, all right. So it's about the same here, except that it's hailing. And tonight we're supposed to go down to minus 30.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I don't know if you can see outside. It's all white here.
Oh, man,
you
yeah.
Can't see, but whatever.
This is the Backstage Cowboys podcast, episode number 12. Woohoo! This calls for a celebration. Of course, I could have called for a celebration earlier on, but I just thought of it now. I'd like to thank all of our listeners, first of all, for being there and for spreading the word. If it weren't for you, I'd be talking to myself, which I often do, by the way, but that's another story. Would you believe I'm also celebrating my 35th year in the show business technical world? Yep, a lot has happened since I first started shoving speakers, mixers, and amps in my 1984 Ford Escort. The first big thing that happened to me is that at some point in time, my career really kicked off when I realized I was not a sound man and started doing lights. Oh, speaking of which, I'm working on my next book called Let There Be the Light Guy. Like my first book, it's some sort of an autobiography, but this time is more oriented towards my technical career. Whereas my first book was all about my transformation from a fat guy to this handsome, attractive man I have become. Well, anyway, more information on that to come as I try to remember all the funky things that I've seen and lived in this business. So, what else is new? Oh yeah, upcoming is USITT 2019 in Louisville, Kentucky, March 21st to March 23rd. I will be there at booth number 1351, the Spotlight booth. Now, for those who don't know, Spotlight is an Italian manufacturer of very high-quality theatrical lighting fixtures. If you happen to be in the neighborhood, please come and say hi. After that, you will find me at Expo Scene in Montreal, Canada, April 17th and 18th, 2019. There you'll find me either at the AVL Media Group booth showing off my Spotlight fixtures and Able-Light consoles, or you might find me at the Sounds Distribution booth talking about Blizzard lighting and Lightshark consoles. Or maybe at the GLP Roadshow in room 512A. Or maybe giving a speech on the history of theatrical lighting and the challenges of transition to LED in one of the CITT presentation breakout rooms. Anyway, if you can't find me, message me through BackstageCowboys.com or the Backstage Cowboys Facebook page, and I'll tell you where I am at that time. So, what now? Oh yeah, episode number 12. This time I'm taking you to Nashville, Tennessee to meet up with David Henry, a bright young man who specializes in online stage lighting training. His website is called LearnStageLighting.com. He'll tell you all about it as soon as we're done with this music intro thing. So I'd like to ask the gentleman holding two sticks in his hand to kick this off right now.
So, yeah, let's get this thing going. Well, first of all, where are you from, man?
Man, so I actually grew up in Pennsylvania, and so I live in Nashville, but grew up in central Pennsylvania. I love the weather here so much better.
I believe you.
I don't mind a little snow, but I do appreciate the heat here. And so, yeah, I grew up in central Pennsylvania, did my first few years of this business there, and then decided to make the move to Nashville.
Wow. And how did that happen?
Well, I quickly found out, kind of a year or two into it, I was in a somewhat rural area, kind of in between a few different cities. And I quickly found out that the off season, it was big.
Yeah.
The off season was really long, like 3/4 of the year long.
Okay. Yeah.
And most of the year, I always felt like I was taking some older guy's job away, like all the time, just because I was the younger guy who really, understood DMX and that stuff.
Uh-huh. How old are you now?
And so I am 28 now. And so about 10 years ago, I moved down here. So yes, I was literally 18.
Wow, you were brand new.
Yeah, I had worked a couple years down there. And and I had some friends who lived here in Nashville. And they were like, hey, well, while you're still young and, not married or anything, move down here and see if this will work for you.
Yeah, I'll bet there's lots of work in Nashville, right?
Yeah, there is. It's hard to break into like anywhere. But once, I think, like a lot of places, once you establish yourself and if you do great work for your clients and, the basic stuff, always show up, smile, do great work, you'll have repeat business that, just comes back much more than you need.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've been pretty much through that same story. So tell me, the way I see it, if my calculations are right, you started at around 16 years old, right?
Yeah, right about then.
How did that all start? Where's what are your beginnings?
Yeah, so this is kind of an interesting story. I was thinking about it this morning, and even when I was a little kid, like anytime we were like at a public event or something and you walked by, what I now know as front of house, my head would always kind of do one of these, kind of just turn, and I wasn't always sure why, but there was just an innate curiosity always there. And so fast forward a few years, I was probably, maybe 11 or 12 or so, and my brother was volunteering with the church youth group to do the AV stuff. And I quickly found out that if you did that, you could skip the service, the main service. You didn't have to go to the service. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I quickly volunteered. And then I found out that I really liked this stuff.
Okay, so it didn't start in school. It actually started in church.
Yeah, and then I got plugged into the school's theater program, and from there, thankfully, my high school had a really good program where they forced you to kind of like, hey, figure out like what you want to do like as a career, and then figure out, how you need to get there. And so they really forced us into that. So, I was able to do a job shadow, just, show up for a day of work with a few guys, one guy who did lighting, one guy who did installs, one guy who was a touring guy, and I realized I was like, oh, this is really cool, and I was really looking for a job and a career that I didn't have to go to college for, because at that point I was in high school and I was not doing great. I was not a good fit for the way the school system likes to teach people.
Like many of us.
And so I found this and I was like, hey, these people seem to be surviving. They've got families, right, and whatnot, and they, they seem to not be totally at the poverty level, and they're happy, and I seem to enjoy this. So, I've just kept pursuing that.
Yeah, I've mentioned this before. I remember I started late my career. I've done some AV work, earlier on in my life, but then I stopped and I started doing a serious job. So I was a computer technician, and then I became a financial advisor for some reason. And and when I got back to doing this, I was, moving lights for a birthday party or something like that, and I felt weird. I felt like maybe I should be working. Oh yeah, I'm paid for this. It's, it takes some getting used to, but you can actually make a decent living out of it. So moving from Pennsylvania to Nashville. Excuse my ignorance. What state is Nashville in? Tennessee. Tennessee,
yeah.
That's right.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
I know this. It's just that, my brain's not up this morning. So how did you were 18. So you just what? You just packed up and left, or how do you move from one state to another when you're 18 like that? I mean, do you have anything planned out or something?
I mean, at that point there was Craigslist, and so I literally, being a fairly ignorant, young guy, I found a place, for rent on Craigslist, and rented it.
Okay.
And, I had a little bit of money, a couple months worth, and I just, I had a couple contacts, down here, like I'd mentioned, and they were all like, I was always just trying to talk to people ahead of time and arrange things, and there was a lot of, we get this a lot. So once you're done here, call us. And and so I just had to, I literally had to jump. I packed up all the stuff in my Volkswagen and I drove 12 hours down here and,
Wow.
Found the place I was renting was what? 5 guys in a 2-bedroom.
Oh, okay.
It was inexpensive. But it worked for the time being. I think I was there about 5 months, and then the second I was doing decent enough to get out of there, I sure as heck got out.
Okay. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what's your specialty now? What do you do exactly?
Yeah, so my world has transformed a lot over the past few years. Because back in, 2012 or 2013, I kind of started just blogging on the side over at learnstagelighting.com. And I just kind of want to write, basically, the things I wish someone had told me when I was starting. Because I don't know how it was when you started in AV, but for me, especially with lighting, like you'd work with different people and you'd get this piece of information from this guy and this piece from that guy and this piece from that guy. And some of it connected, but there were a lot of holes and just things that were missing. And things that just plain conflicted.
Yep. Oh, there was no documentation when I started, at least not that I knew of.
Yeah.
So, you had to learn everything on the fly. I mean, just learning the terms, like heads up and, stage right, stage left and all that. I mean, it was hard to find some documents that had that. And there weren't many courses in school for that either. So, today we have the internet. There's a lot more information going on. But, as you were mentioning, when I started, it was very, very difficult. You had to find somebody who knew what they were doing and who was willing to teach you. So what you're doing is very noble.
Yeah, so I just started writing, and then there was a point, probably about 2015, I was doing lighting design full-time here for a company, pretty happy, but wanted to work less, of course. That happens a lot in this business.
Yeah.
Shows get sold and you're working. And at about the same time, the site was really starting to grow too. And I was getting a lot of emails from people, just a lot of questions, a lot of people looking for more help, especially people who are real beginners or intermediate level. And so I kind of sat down and I was like, well, at this point, and at that point too, I had a son who was a baby too. So at that point, I was like, well, I either need to shut this thing down because it's taking too much time, or I need to turn it into something that at least makes a little bit of money to be worth like all the time I'm throwing into it because it's starting to get crazy. And so that was when I decided to really start, looking at courses and developing, my first course. I made one for band lighting and then followed up with one on church lighting. And now there's a whole bunch of them. But, really started just focusing on creating the best training possible out there for our industry, especially for people who are beginners. And, it's blossomed into so much now. I mean, as you're obviously aware, I was then able to do the Martin M Series training videos. And then the nice folks at Light Shark, who we're both a fan of as well, we got together and I got to do their videos as well. And so it's been a crazy experience. And so now I do probably about 20% freelance design work and then, lighting shows, mostly corporate shows. And the rest is all through this website. It's pretty nuts.
Wow, that's amazing, man. And that's how we met, actually, through the Light Shark thing. Because I did a Light Shark review for Canada. And
that's right.
And at one point, I think you commented on my video or something like that, and we kind of connected that way. So now you're doing this like 80% of the time, right? You're working online.
It's crazy, yeah.
Really, and so how many courses do you have out there?
Oh gosh, well, most of my courses are kind of encapsulated just within a membership where people pay monthly, quarterly, or yearly, and so within that, I've probably got. They're of various sizes, but there's probably, 30 in there.
Wow.
It's a pretty in-depth library, from various consoles to, like I mentioned, band lighting, church lighting, DJ lighting, basics to how to run lights on the fly to music, all kinds of stuff like that.
Okay. And what was my question? God, I'm out of coffee. So people just pay like one fee and they have access to all that?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And there was, after I'd made my first couple courses, I kind of launched, I think, course number 3 or 4. And at that point, just trying to market them and keep all the marketing and all the different pages and the emails and who to promote what to, trying to keep that all straight got really complicated. And I've, kind of learned about membership sites. Just somebody pays, they get access to everything. And I realized, I was like, oh, that is like so much simpler on me, on the, explanation, marketing, confusion, it simplifies things so much that I can make, basically the shortest path from someone who needs to know what's going on to getting the information they need. So it's easiest for me, it's easiest for them to get in, and then they have access to all the information.
Okay. And are you doing this strictly online, or are you giving like personal courses too?
Yeah, so far it's pretty much been strictly online.
Okay.
Sometimes people call me online and we have one-to-one chats. And at LDI this year, I did do a Light Shark training with Blizzard, but other than that, it's pretty much online. It's kind of crazy. I'm not against doing in-person things. It's just so far it's been online, and I don't mind that.
Well, it's just so efficient.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay. And so how much time does that take up in your day? I mean, all the follow-ups and the emails and questions and all that.
Following up to people and questions and stuff, it's probably only, an hour or 2 a day. A lot of my time is spent, making new content, keeping the courses up to date, things like that, working with the manufacturers. And then, of course, like the past couple weeks, I was out of town doing a show. And so I was very, very much out of touch and, keeping up on the fringes.
Well, yeah, you got to keep active a little bit. I'm working for a distributor, so I'm not as active as I used to be. But whenever some a friend of mine overbooks himself and asks me to cover for him, I'll gladly do it just to stay in the game. And we're pushing Evo-Light's console, so I really need to take them out on the road and
you got to know it.
Keep up,
Yeah.
Keep up, because I got lots of questions to answer, and if I'm not using them, then I don't have answers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Okay, so you're a family man, right?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I've been married about 7 years now, and we got a 5-year-old son, and so that's me and my wife. We grew up together, actually, knew each other, and that was part of what got me to move. Was kind of like, well, I'm not really making a great living here. I got to either figure out a different career or, I got to figure something out. And so I, made the move to Nashville partially because we were like, we saw ourselves getting pretty serious, and we were like, well, right now my career is not really, generating an income that
okay, so you actually met in Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Yeah,
okay.
We went to school together, yeah.
Oh,
absolutely.
And you moved together, or she moved after?
She moved after, once I'd proven once I'd proven myself, that I wasn't going to get kicked back to Pennsylvania. Yeah, smart lady.
Yeah, that's cool. So, what's the future? What are you up to now? What's the next step?
Man, I tell you, I just take it one day at a time, It's a lot of fun working with people, helping people grow, learning new things. I'm always on the lookout, especially with consoles, because I emphasize a lot on consoles through my site, because if there's one thing that can kind of either hinder you or give you an incredible amount of freedom in your lighting, it's on the console side. You and I have both seen so many times when someone gets sold a console they don't need, either that's extremely excessive or the opposite, extremely limited, for what they bought in lights or what they have in lights. And so I'm always looking for those things that, those consoles that are really game changers, that, give people more control, for less costs, and can do new and exciting things. And so, but as for me in Lone Stage Lighting, every day, just hitting the pavement, it's not always easy. Some days I'm like, I should just do lighting full time, but it is a ton of fun to teach people, and it's continually something that, continues to grow, and I get to work with these awesome manufacturers, and, help them explain their products, help them make their products better, and yeah, just enjoy every day.
Yeah, so how many people are following you, or actually are following your courses right now?
Yeah, so in my courses, I think there's around 150 people ish.
Cool.
In that range, and so yeah, it's very exciting. It's like I said, it's an almost full-time thing, which is really cool. To be able to do this, I mean, 5 years ago, if you had asked me, would I be teaching people about lighting on the internet full time, I probably would not have imagined it was possible. But it's
so and the inevitable question that people are definitely asking themselves right now is, how much does it cost to get on your plan, on your teaching
Oh,
plan?
absolutely. Yeah. So when is this coming out? This is coming out in February or January? Podcast.
Oh, this podcast? Well, you know what? Normally I need a long plane ride to edit all this. And I don't have any coming up until March, but I will get around to it. I figure mid-February.
Okay, that's great. So, because February 1st, I'm taking a slight price increase, and so monthly is going to be $40 a month, quarterly for $80, and yearly for $240.
Okay.
So it simplifies things out and pushes people a bit towards the longer term, which is better for everybody.
Well, yeah. So if somebody takes the monthly plan, is there a minimum amount of months, or can they opt out anytime they want?
They can literally sign up and then cancel their recurring billing the second they cancel. They show up and they get their month, and then when the month's over, it ends.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So and all these people, they are they all from the States, or do you have people worldwide also following you?
It's a good bit from the States, but there's, I think, maybe like 10 to 15% are probably Europe, and then there's a few from Australia. Mostly English-speaking countries, naturally, but occasionally you get someone from somewhere weird, somewhere totally different.
Because the podcast, it kind of exploded unexpectedly, because I started it for Canada, actually.
Oh,
and because I was just I just wanted to bring out some major players on the Canadian scene, and then it just went worldwide, like all of a sudden. So then I figured, okay, well, let's just get interesting people wherever they're from. So this is really getting interesting, and I'm starting to think that I might do some remotes. I was hoping to get some interviews at LDI, but I just didn't have the time, because I also have products I need to take care of. So I didn't get the time to do that, but I'll see if I can get around to it when we go to the USITT thing.
Yeah,
and I know you'll be there, right?
Yeah, I should be. It's one of those that it's like literally this year it's only 3 hours away from me, so it's kind of a no-brainer. I was kind of figuring I'd go, and so why not?
Yeah, and that's part of the United States I've never seen, so I'm looking forward to that. Yeah. So, well, why don't you tell me about the shows you've done? What kind of gigs you've been on, and some anecdotes or some experiences you've had that might be a little odd or interesting to hear.
Oh man, which one?
Yeah, there you go.
There's so much.
I put my finger on the button there.
Yeah, gosh, in over 10 years, there's so much. So many things that blur together, because I think of a lot of folks that I've fallen into this as well, where you kind of eventually fall into a niche of things that you like. But early on, especially when I was first in Nashville, I'd take anything. I mean, anything that paid. That's a gig, even if it didn't pay sometimes. And so I started. Gosh. I started doing, up in Pennsylvania, I did like county fairs and weddings and fashion shows. And then I moved down here and I went on tour with an illusionist, actually, because I had done an illusion tour in Pennsylvania. It was one of those, very low paying gigs, but it was a gig in the off season.
Yeah, illusionists are a little complicated. I did a tour with a comedian magician.
Yeah,
and we all know that there's no trick to what they do. It's all magic, right? But to keep that magic on stage, we need to do our work differently than normally. I mean, you light up a stage, but I mean, if you're doing an illusionist or you're doing a magician, there are certain restrictions. There are certain things you have to take into consideration so that the public get a magic show, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes that can be a little tricky.
Yeah, I found illusions really interesting, having worked with a couple different illusionists, because the two different guys I worked with were very different. One guy was you're signing your rights away, you'll never say a thing about anything you saw backstage, and the next guy was, there was none of that to be seen. And it's interesting because, as you say, especially with illusions, lighting can matter a lot.
Yeah.
But with the second guy, he had started and grown up, doing some pretty small magic shows where he often didn't have any control over the lighting. And so he literally didn't need anything special out of lighting 90% of the time. There'd be once in a while where he'd ask for something, but most of the time it was just all him. And it was, it was really amazing to see that level of talent.
That's
for
what
sure.
I call it talent. Exactly.
For sure. I mean, some of those, those larger illusions and things that do some pretty, magnificent things, they're hard work. Like, it's not just a trick. That's definitely something you learn in this industry when you work with different performers, is you gain a lot of respect for what they do. And illusionists are, some very hardworking people out there, and lighting them can be hard. If you do need to light or not light something, and you mess up, then you're gonna hear about it. And it's gonna be difficult. I remember there were times where we were brought back to the hotel room, and it was not always a happy conversation going on about something.
Well, of course, the artist looks bad. Whenever we miss our cues or whatever, and I remember this comedian magician. He was so good. We were actually backstage, and he was practicing his card tricks. Making cards appear out of thin air.
Yeah,
and he was doing it in front of me, and I could see how he does it, and I still couldn't believe it. I said, "Okay, I see how you do it, and that's not possible." Did you often have to go far away from home, or were you mostly close to where you live? All those gigs you've been doing.
Really a good mix of both. In the past 5-6 years since I worked at that production company, I've kind of fallen into the niche of doing a lot of corporate events, sales meetings, conferences, et cetera, et cetera. And, those have really become my bread and butter of lighting design. They're, for what they are, they're not always the most exciting thing in the world, but, they pay well, they're fairly predictable. They tend to happen every year. A particular show, will happen again and again and again every year. And if you've got one client who does those kind of shows, they can have a lot of work for you, potentially. And
you're working in comfortable venues, like you
Yes.
have conference halls, and rigging is easy. All the accessories are there. The lifts are there. The load in's easy. The load out is easy. You're air conditioned or heated or whatever it is you need at that time of year.
Yes,
so it's a very comfortable job. And some people find a way to complain about their job, and it's just, I don't get it. I mean, come on, go outside, do a festival in the mud. Let me know if your job is that bad.
Yeah, I have an audio guy friend who I work with a lot, and he likes to say, we're not building roads.
There you go. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
The name of your site is
LearnStagelighting.com. Yep.
LearnStagelighting.com.
Yep.
Okay, so people just can go to your site directly and sign up for the courses, right?
Exactly. Yep, exactly. You'll get some information, yeah, as you browse through the site. You'll see it. It's called Learn Stage Lighting Labs is the site that's got, all the courses in it and all that jazz. But even on the free site, there's a lot of articles, there's a YouTube where I've got videos that I'm always posting about various things and, yeah. It's
okay, so why don't you take me through all those courses and what do you talk about in those courses, and what can somebody expect to learn, from following these? Yeah, that's I'm in an office, right? And I got people calling me. Maybe not necessarily me, but I got people calling on the intercom. And we might have the warehouse manager that'll just yell out my name because he has a question or something. and I like the live side of this. I mean, whatever happens.
Yeah, exactly.
This is a no rules podcast.
It's just like a real show, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So So what can we expect to find on your 30 somewhat different courses?
Yes, I just pulled it up, and like here, if I start, I've got a couple courses on church lighting. Oh, actually, I'll use my site to filter. Yeah, so I've got like 5 courses here on church lighting to start off. One's like the real basics, like if you know nothing about lighting, this is square one. What is DMX? What is a console? What cables do I need? Where should I put my lights? Level 1, it's about 3 hours, and it gets you really, gets you a good firm footing where you can make a good basic lighting setup look great.
Cool.
Then I've got a couple advanced courses on church lighting where we dive deeper into, design, programming, using different angles of light, things like that. Popping over to the band side, we've got primarily 2 courses. One is called the Lighting Basics Blueprint, and what it does is it just walks people through, again, base level. You know nothing about lighting, and you want to create a great lighting show for your band. I show you how to do it. We talk about what console you should use, what software you should choose, what lights you should get, how to save time setting things up, how to troubleshoot when things don't work right, all that goodness. Then that's followed up with another course called From Zero to Lighting Hero, which is just an extension of it saying, okay, now it's no longer, 2 trees in the front and a couple backlights. Now let's talk about putting a real, good full rig together for, a band in a club. Not huge, but of a bigger size. Say you've got a 24-foot stage or something and you want to fill it with lights. Then we've got Puntastical. This is actually one of the more popular ones because it's just basically riffing off the word punting, which is, of course, running lights just on the fly to music or, whatever. But the biggest thing being that this is an area that people find hard to learn, and I understand because I've been there, that you have to be able to program your console in a way that you can get to what you need quickly, but that you don't have too much stuff that you can't find what you need, so that you're always able to make the changes in the lights that you want when you want that change to happen. Hopefully at the speed or the rate that you want it to happen at. As you and I know, that's going to depend a lot on your console. Some consoles are more forgiving and more able to do that kind of stuff than others.
That's right. And then it's all about how you program and how you place your stuff on the console.
Yeah.
And I'm a fan of that. I'm a fan of not programming too much and giving yourself the freedom to follow the band and just jam and try to play on the same note.
Absolutely. Yeah, as an example, perfect example of this is, I was doing this show last week and they had a party night, on this corporate show, so they brought in this band, and I really didn't have to program anything for the band because I've got a pre-programmed punt page, in my MA that's in my show file, and I just clone the rig into it, and then it's there. I know where the stuff is, and it's a good, you just follow what the band's doing. And
let me just ask this question: Are you the kind of guy who drags his framework of programming and you load that up and you start from there, or are you the kind of guy who likes to start with a clean slate and just have nothing in the board before you start a gig?
Oh, I like to preload things in there if I can. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. I like to start with a template file. Oh yeah.
Okay.
I am all about having a starting point.
Yeah, I'm the opposite. I'm the guy who starts with an empty board. Yeah. Don't ask me why. Well, it all depends on how the complexity of the install. But under 24 moving lights, yeah, I like to start fresh. So we were going through your courses there.
Yeah, so that was some band lighting stuff. Then we've got a DJ lighting 101 course that just talks through, people who are DJs, how to get started with lighting and not just be on sound active mode. That's a big theme on my site. A lot of places is, you could use sound active mode, but if you're here, you probably know that you don't want to use sound active mode. And let me show you why. You don't want to use that and how you can do so much better with just some basic tools.
Yeah, if your music is tight, why shouldn't your lighting be tight?
Exactly.
That's what makes you a cut above everybody else.
Exactly. And then on the the technical side, I cover I've got courses on NTEX DMX's console, D Pro, then Chave Show Express. We've got the good old Light Shark. We've got Elation's Onyx, formerly Martin's M Series, and did I get everybody? I think I got everybody. We've also got a course in here about professional lighting console basics, which is just like the, just the basics of moving light consoles. What is tracking? What are palettes or presets? How do effects work in these consoles, generally across all the consoles? Because when it comes down to it, if you're using Onyx or a Hog or an MA or even your friendly Avo lights, there's a lot that's shared between them. There's a lot that's the same across these consoles, and so in that course we go over all of those things and teach you those. And then we get into networking, lighting for video. We get into working with custom LED pixels and pixel mapping.
Okay.
And so, working with previs, capture. So there's a lot going on. And that's about the 30,000 foot view of most everything.
So you're using capture. Are you using WYSIWYG also?
I do not have WYSIWYG. No, I've just got capture.
So you're working with capture, and concerning the more professional consoles like the MAs, the Hogs, and I'll mention Avo lights too because that's kind of my favorite. Are you doing anything specific with these lines of consoles?
Yeah, so I just do Onyx. Most of my audience at this point is more beginner level. So if they're gonna use a professional console, they don't really want choices. They generally want something that is at a reasonable price point that will do what they need. And I think an Onyx is by far in my mind the best fit for that market. The fact that they've got, multiple, M-Touch and M-Play, those hardware interfaces for $500, you get a nice wing that you can actually do stuff with is, absolutely a game changer, compared to what was around before where, $1,000-ish could get you a playback wing, but to get one that had a programming section was, maybe $3,000 for the Camsys. I'm not sure. And so it's something that people ask me about a lot, and it's so tough. There's only so much time.
That's true.
I'm always trying to make sure I always stay on top of keeping my tutorials on every console I do fully up to date with the latest software. And so every time I add a console, that's another that I have to keep track of.
Another thing, to keep maintenance on.
I like comparing them, and I don't mind all those other consoles, but I do really like Onyx. I did have the experience back in August. I spent 10 days on an Avo, which was the first time I had touched one since a Pearl 2000.
Okay.
So it was a little different.
It's another world, isn't it?
Yeah, and it was a new, PC Titan, with the wings and stuff.
Yeah.
And it was a different world. I spent, of that 10 days, I probably spent about 7 getting mad at it. And then the last 3, I was like, okay. I respect you, Avo. I now I now grasp how you want to work. It's very different, but I now get it. I now see how this works and why people like it.
Yeah, well, actually,
You know?
if you go on my site, BackstageCowboys.com, you can download a manual that I wrote.
Oh, cool.
That is, it's a small manual, and it's strictly it helps do the transition.
Yeah.
So if you're used to working with a hog, an MA, or even a CompuLite, because I used to be a CompuLite guy too. And so this manual takes you, if you're used to working with a certain console, it takes you from where I know what you're looking for. Mm-hmm. And I know how you're looking for it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take you directly to how you should interpret that with the Avolites console. So that kind of demystifies, the thing, where the hell is this, or how come I can't do this, or why doesn't it work like I'm expecting it to work?
Yeah.
So it just brings you into the mentality of a different console, and I've been through that so many times. I mean, making the transition between CompuLite, MA, Hog, Martin, Avolites, and so on, and now the Light Shark. But the Light Shark is magically easy. It
really is, yeah. Yeah, it's funny how they've put it together. The way that it seems to be to me is it's kind of this magic blend of Avolites and Camsys and Hog, and like it kind of there's a little bit of everything in it, and but it works really well. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I say. I mean, if you have never done any lighting in your life before, within an hour, you're able to do something.
Yeah.
And if you are a lighting guy, give it 20 minutes and you figured it out, So it's pretty cool. Although now that they just put out a manual that has 150 pages, so that'll be interesting. I still have to go through that.
They did. I've read it because I looked over. They translated it to English, but then they sent it over to me and had me go over it, and that was good because their English translation, it wasn't spot on, given that they don't speak English as their primary language or anything near it. Especially when it comes to industry terminology and things like that just don't translate well from someone who learned English, from a book effectively.
And if you do speak a little Spanish, then you get it. You read it and you say, yeah, okay, I know how they're thinking and all that. And me being a French guy, I have that thing too.
Exactly.
Sometimes I read something in English that doesn't make sense to somebody like you, maybe. But me, I get it. Okay, I know what they're trying to say. It's just that they're saying it wrong. And I still have that problem too. Sometimes I speak in English and it comes out funny because I'm thinking in French.
Yeah.
And now I got to get the Light Shark guys to translate their stuff in French because I get a lot of calls for that. Maybe I'll have to do it. Whatever.
Yeah, but like you're saying, that's one of the things I think is pretty amazing about the Light Shark. I don't know how you found out about it. Probably the same way I did. You probably walked by it at LDI, 2 years ago. Maybe not. And I walked by it, and I was like, oh, look, another PC wing. And I went, walked right past it. And then on the last day I was walking around, and I walked by it again, and I started talking to the guys, and I was like, oh, this is really something, It's not just another, $1,000, PC wing. It's literally a full console for a really reasonable price that seemingly can do some cool stuff. And it can. And, I love that comment that you made about the time that it takes to learn it. Somebody who doesn't know anything could be going in an hour. Because back at LDI this year, I'd taught a course the day before LDI for Blizzard, a Light Shark 101 course, and they scheduled it for like 5 hours. And,
oh God!
And I was like, well, guys, I'll teach everything you want to learn, but this may not take 5 hours, and sure enough, it didn't. It was great. There was, tons of time for questions and all of that stuff. And everybody was happy with what they learned, but it's sure, it's amazing what you can do in such a small, inexpensive package.
Well, yeah. And actually I found out about it, my managing director just put a pamphlet. He came back from ProLight, I think it was, and he or something in Amsterdam. I don't remember what trade show. There's so many, and he just put this on my desk. He put a pamphlet on my desk, and he says, "Here, have a look at this." And I had a quick look, and I said, "Oh, great, just what we need, another console."
Yeah, yeah.
And he said, no. He says, really, take the time to look at it. I said, okay. And I looked at it and I said, okay, you got to get one of these down here right now. And he says, that's what I thought. He's pretty good at spotting. He's a sound guy, but he's very good at spotting good products,
Yeah.
And that's it. And there's this question that's been at the back of my head almost since the beginning of our conversation. You talk about church lighting, you talk about band lighting, and you talk about corporate lighting. And here's my question. How is church lighting different from something else like band lighting or festival lighting or corporate or a tour lighting? What is specific about a church that you would do a course just on that?
Well, it is and it isn't different. And that's what makes it interesting. Really all of these types of lighting all have things that they share, as we know. And so, for example, church lighting, obviously there's a music portion. If it's a more modern, worship band, then you're probably going to match that with the lighting. So that's not really any different from band lighting. It might be, toned down a little. It might not be. It really depends on the individual church. But then, you've got that. But then there's also the fact that you might be running iMag, video on the screens or live stream, and you need your stage wash to look real good on video for that. And with band lighting, usually that's not top priority or anywhere near there unless you're on, a very large stage. Usually up until that point, the front lighting is kind of there and it's not really well thought out. And so you've got that aspect of it too, which comes, very much from the corporate events or theater world of doing your wash nice. And so it's really, it's a mix of both. And it can be, very theatrical as well. Some slow, subtle changes, can make a big difference across a church's stage. And so, like any type of lighting, it's got the things that make it unique, but at the same time, there's also nothing new under the sun, per se, where, all lighting in some aspect, is going to share some attributes.
Well, exactly. I see church lighting as I see corporate events because there's so many different types. There's so many different acts. We've done circus acts on corporate events. We've done speeches. We've done broadcast.
Yeah.
And I think the complexity of church lighting is hanging, because many buildings were not designed to hang fixtures. So sometimes that's a challenge. Getting the fixture in the right position. And especially because many of these buildings have funky architectures, so it's not always easy. And you want to respect the building also. You want to respect how the building looks. And, and sometimes these are 100-year-old buildings, and we don't want to wreck anything just by trying to make them modern. And one question I have also is church. Of all the churches you've done. And this has never happened to me, but I do have the question all the time. Has there ever been a church gig you've done where you actually smoked up the room?
Oh, haze? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, haze.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, when I was before I moved down here, I was working for a company, and we were doing some conferences for this particular church group, and it was at a church, and they even had a hazer at the church, and they were like, have at it. Yeah.
Well, that was my question, because it's never happened to me so far, although I have not done many churches, and the churches I have done that required haze were kind of transformed into venues. So it was not a service. It was more of a show. It was more of a production thing,
Got it.
And sadly, many churches are being converted to venues now because they're kind of being deserted. I don't know if that's the case where you are, but over here, many churches are kind of going out of business. And I think some of the administrators are getting the idea that, if somebody can buy the building for $1 and turn it into a theater, why don't we just keep it and do that ourselves?
Oh, interesting.
And,
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you can keep on doing services, but at the same time, your building is generating money instead of costing.
Yeah.
But we're totally elsewhere here right now.
That's all right.
So, have you always been strictly doing lights, or have you touched other aspects of all the audiovisual stuff?
Yeah, I've done a decent bit of audio as well too, and so absolutely, I've totally done a good bit of audio in my day. I'm not as up to speed as I once was. I think I learned I was quite good on the Yamaha's 5D, 1D, M7, LS9 range. Those are obviously not current anymore. but even the other week, I had gotten called in on a Sunday afternoon. I just sitting down to eat lunch, and my phone rings. And I'm like, that's odd. And sure enough, there was a no-show LD on a tiny gig locally here. And so I was like, well, I guess I'm coming, and and then we got it set up, and they were having a little dinner, and it was real basic, but they were having a little dinner, and the audio guy went out to troubleshoot something for the camera crew because they weren't getting signal, but it was their wireless system. Anyways, their problem. But no surprise there. But and it was an X32, and he was like, "Well, can you just watch this for a minute?" I was like, "Yeah, I'll watch it for you." And sure enough, you go from someone who's like 6'10" standing at the podium who'd put the mic up for him to this lady who was like, oh gosh, 4'6", total opposite. And she doesn't even consider moving the mic. He doesn't think about it, and she's just sitting there, doing this, looking up at it. And oops. I was like, well, let's see if this works like those old Yamahas. And sure enough, it did. So, I've learned a good bit about video along the way. I sure don't know as much about video as I do about audio or lighting. But, I think if anything, it's important to at least get a small skill set in all the areas, because you never know when it's going to come in handy.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. And sometimes, one person has time to help the other. So if you know a bit about what they're doing, then that certainly helps.
Yeah, you can run the cable in the right direction, things like that.
Yeah. I still run some backwards, though, sometimes after all these years.
Oh, especially audio cables. They're just, when you think about DMX and, it's just so backwards.
Yeah, well, one time I had a guy and a girl, young people. They pulled a feeder. I think it was it was a synagogue, and they pulled a 100-foot feeder, 40 cam lock. For those who don't know, that's 5 cables the size of my thumb. Okay,
and that means heavy.
And that means very heavy. And so they pulled the whole cable and up through the stairs, through the mezzanine, back down into the venue, then all the way up to the stage. And they got on stage, and they brought me the mail end.
Oh, no.
So the mail goes to the panel, of course. So I had to tell them, well, I got good news and bad news. And they said, what's the bad news? I said, your feeder's backwards, and you're going to have to rerun it. I said, what's the good news? Well, after this happened once to you, it'll never happen to you again. Yeah, think about it next time.
Yeah. You're triple checking that one next time.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd like to know if you have any particular advice you'd like to give to people starting out in the business out there, or who are thinking of doing this for a living.
Yeah, as weird as this sounds, and I think anybody who's been in this business for a while can probably tell you this, that being polite and being slightly persistent is going to go a long way. Not crazily persistent, but like when you're looking for work and you're getting contacts from whoever, or you're just literally cold calling companies, it does make an impact, even if it doesn't feel like it, when you call people back. If they call you, you make sure you reply to that. If they don't call you, you call back about once a month, and you just let them know you're available and you'd love to work for them. Unless the person on the other end of the phone says, don't ever come back, you've pretty much got fair game to continue to stay in touch with them. And then, when you are working with someone, or even before you are, after you are, whatever, just being polite, make sure you communicate, whether you're talking, writing, clearly, you're using, decent grammar, things like that, not using all caps, just just trying to make sure with the people you're working with that you be really respectful really goes a long way. It's like, the people that, continue stay busy and work again and again and again and again aren't necessarily the very best people at lighting. They're probably quite good, but the fact that they're easy to work with and they're reliable and they're nice are the things that gets you on that list in somebody's head that when they need somebody, they're going to call you.
Yeah, that's one of the best pieces of advice we've had on this podcast. I mean, I hear a lot, show up on time, and you got to be careful with your attitude and all that. That's very, very important, and everything is learnable, but your attitude belongs to you.
Yeah.
And it's funny because what you mentioned there reminded me of how I got my first job. I think I was 11 or 12 or something, and they told me, well, there's this agency that hires students, and they find jobs for them here and there. So I go to this agency, and I sign up, and I tell them, okay, I'd like to work, and they say, yeah, okay, we'll call you if we have anything. I said, okay, great. So the next morning I come back. I say, hi, I just wanted to check up to see what you had for me. And, well, we have nothing. We'll call you if we have something. I said, okay, fine. I walk out. I came back the next morning. So the first time I went was on a Monday. On a Wednesday, so that was, second time I went back. I was coming in there as if I was coming into work. Yeah. It's like, you see, I can show up on time. I'm here every morning at 8,
Yeah.
But I didn't mention that. I just came in and said, well, so you have something for me? And then they said, oh, no, we'll call you if we have something. I said, fine, see you tomorrow. And they didn't let me exit. They actually gave me something. So it only took 2 repetitions to actually get a job, and I worked all summer.
Yeah.
So, persistency is definitely a key thing. And it really, I mean, as I've hired people many times in my life as a director and all that. And, of course, the person who shows up every morning and who's ready to work, or maybe I've actually been a booker in my life. And in the morning, when I get in the morning, I have a bunch of gigs to book. Mm-hmm. And what do? I wait an hour and see who's going to call me. Mm. So anybody who calls me gets a gig. Yeah, for sure. And after that, I start calling people once I still have some spots to fill. But definitely, if you have the initiative to call me, you definitely get a job, unless you're really, really rotten at what you do. But that doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
So you still get called for gigs, right? Once in a while.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's funny. I was in a pattern, as it's like the website was growing, but also I'd been in Nashville longer doing gigs. And so there was a point of a couple years here where I just, constantly, unfortunately, had to be turning things down, which is always hard to do. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, Nashville's probably for a while had a shortage of good LDs, and multiple people have told me this. And at the same time, this business is growing, and I have to put more time into it. And so, thankfully, that's finally died down. I still do a fair amount of gigs. Like my phone just, yesterday rang with one in a couple of weeks, just a quick one day. I was like, okay, but yeah, I still get a lot of calls for gigs because people need good lighting people, and happy to work with, especially people I've worked with before. The experience. Sometimes, as you find, it's just as important who you're working for. They're obviously hiring you as a lighting person, and they care about getting a quality person. Yeah. But there's also there could be some bad company experiences on the other end, for sure. Mm-hmm. And you gotta, you always gotta watch out for that. You want to give people the benefit of the doubt, but as you've probably known, once in a rare while you go work for somebody and you don't get paid, or you get paid much less than you thought, and so especially as I've grown, it's great to just have a few clients, like literally like 2, of production companies that I can work for. And, know they're going to be reliable. I have an idea of what gear they have. And so it makes, everything a lot easier.
Well, yeah, I kind of trimmed it down over the years too. Well, especially earlier on in my career, because I had this company I was working with, and then all of a sudden we have downtimes here. Not as many now, but at the time, January was slow and August was slow, and I'd start the year in January and nobody was calling me. So I'd freak out, and I'd start calling everybody and saying, "Hey, I'm available, I'm available, I'm available." Nobody had work. And then in February, March, everybody starts calling me, and they're all frustrated because I'm not available.
Yep.
And so I understood after a while that downtime means vacation. Just wait and stick with the companies that you're comfortable with, and you'll go a long way with that. There's one thing I wanted to ask you, like when somebody calls you and says, "Can you do this gig?" and you can't for a reason or another, are there any people you like to refer, or among all your students, can somebody expect eventually to get some insights on how to get gigs or get referred? Does that ever happen?
Yeah, so I mean the things we've talked about so far already, I've talked to people about. Most of my students are not trying to do this as a career. Some do, and I definitely share this kind of info with them. But yeah, I have a handful of 2, 3 good local guys here that I would trust to take gigs. And yeah, I absolutely do pass those along when needed. As I mentioned before, these days I've kind of got 2 clients that I do most of my gigs for, and they know all the names I know by this point.
Yeah. They'll call them themselves.
So yeah, if they call me and I can't do it, they've got the list already.
All right. Well, that's cool. Anything you'd like to mention before we go?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to think. We've covered a lot here. It's been a lot of fun. Yeah, I just encourage people, no matter what you're doing with lighting or audio or whatever, I think like I started my career with, is if you find somebody who does this for a living and they love it, then you probably can too, and you can definitely, find a career like this that while it has its ups and downs, it has its hard parts and its easy parts. It's a lot of fun and it's a great industry to be a part of.
Wonderful. So learnstagelighting.com
Yes.
is how you can reach David Henry. This has been really, really cool, and I'm looking forward to meeting you in person at the USITT event.
Absolutely.
In Louisville, Kentucky. and I have to think about it, not to say Louisville, because here in Quebec we have a Louisville. and for the first time I read it. I actually read the name and I said, okay, there's no E there, so Louisville. So listen, man, it's been a lot of fun. I really appreciate you accepting to do this.
Yeah.
And I also appreciate the fact that you're actually recording the audio on your end, because the signal's pretty good here, surprisingly.
Yeah.
But like I said, I like to keep a standard of quality. So this is really cool. If you can ship me that, then I'll synchronize it, and we'll have a cool episode.
Absolutely. Yep. You bet. Thank you so much.
Hey, take care. Thank you, and see you soon.
Awesome, man. See ya. Bye.
Well, that concludes episode number 12 of the Backstage Cowboys podcast. Thanks for listening, folks. A special thanks to AVL Media Group and Avo Lights, who, in my opinion, make the best lighting consoles in the world. If you'd like to test drive an Avo Lights console or get free training, contact me via BackstageCowboys.com. This is Claude Vier returning you to whatever you were doing before tuning in. Stand by music and go.